Our next report is from the convener of the Renewing the Covenant Task Force, Susan Ritchie, and we're first going to introduce this by video.
I'm Susan Ritchie, and it's been my pleasure to convene the Task Force on Recovenanting. I wanted to share with you a little bit about our process and how we might include each other in some important work that can redefine how we come together as an association. I think the most important thing to notice first is the name of our task force. It's the Task Force on Recovenanting. We UUs already have a lot of covenants with one another. It's a deep part of who we are as a religious people and a part of our religious heritage. Many of us, those of us from congregations, have covenants of church membership. And of course, our congregations, for those of us who are from congregations, have a covenant with one another that forms the Unitarian Universalist Association. We're familiar with that covenant because we find it in our hymnal, and most of us can probably say parts of it from heart. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, do covenant to affirm and promote, and then we list our principles and purposes. And while this is a very lovely statement, it's a formal one, and actually, technically, it is a section of our bylaws. It's not something we renew often, it's not very mutual, and it's not living and dynamic. Which is why we'd like to talk now about recovenanting, supplementing our basic covenant with new ones, so that we can keep our commitments, our resolve, and our promises one to another fresh, dynamic, and mutual. Think people and promises and rainbows, rainbows being one of the ancient signs of covenant, not paperwork and Robert's Rules of Order and endless conversations about bylaws. To understand how this may be, let's begin with the Gemstone of congregational polity, which reminds us that congregations, not bishops or any other hierarchical power, are our highest authority. Only congregations, acting out of their own democratic process, can direct and inform what it is that we do together in association. So how do congregations inform what it is that we all do in the name of Unitarian Universalism? Here's how it currently works. Let's look at an organizational chart of the UUA Governance Structure. Pretty scary, huh? I know this chart is rated R at least for the sheer quantity and difficulty of adult governance content. But if you look at it, if you can even discern it, and don't worry about yourself if you can't, you might be able to see that here at the top we have congregations at the very top of the page, informing all of this very purposeful activity towards the bottom of the page. So how does this informing take place? Well, clearly, General Assembly, right here, is the vital link. Congregations send delegates to General Assembly, and then General Assembly informs all of these folks and entities who do the work of our association and of our congregations on our behalf. So GA informs our ultimate purpose when we elect leaders, when we vote on social action issues, and of course when we change the bylaws, the rules that we set for ourselves. And all of this enables and gives direction and purpose to the UUA's administrative staff, which serves as a kind of central hub for services given to our congregations, amongst other things. However, as wonderful as all of this is, it doesn't really capture entirely some of the things that excite us the most when we really feel that we are living out our purpose together, when we gather as the yellow-shirted love people. And that's why moderator Jim Key asked this task force to consider what it would be like to work away from the idea that we are merely members of a service organization.
At General Assembly last year, I said, we need to explore how we might change the conversation from membership to mutual covenant. What we have seen as we worked with emerging congregations and covenanting communities over the past year is that the practice of covenanting has energized some groups that appeared to be isolated and static. So let's imagine that rather than signing the book, people entered into and were welcomed into covenant that would be renewed periodically. Imagine if congregations and communities entered into and were welcomed into mutual covenant with the larger association that would be renewed periodically. This process of covenanting is an activating impulse that connects our personal commitments in community, drawing individuals together to co-create a world of more love, more justice, and more peace. I asked the Board of Trustees at our October meeting to consider how our association might imagine moving forward from the notion of membership in an institution to one of mutual covenant. The trustees approved naming a task force chaired by the Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie to take up this issue.
We hope to bring specific recommendations related to this charge to the General Assembly in 2017. But in the meantime, we're beginning a listening tour in order to deliberate and imagine together. And specifically, we'd like to ask, what if in fact the UUA was not just a hub serving member congregations, but what if it was itself a complex network of different communities, each in covenant, each making commitments to each other so that each community can realize its own expression of Unitarian Universalist purpose? We can easily imagine that not all of these communities would even be traditional congregations, although many would. But what if some of these communities too would come and go from covenant as we had a shared mission? And what if instead of just up and down voting on issues at General Assembly, what if we had a more deliberative conversation with each other? The sort of conversation that can change lives and communities as we develop and refine our understandings of religious purpose and how to achieve it. What if we had these conversations frequently and everywhere, in our congregations, in our communities, in our theological schools, in our clusters and related organizations, in regional groupings? The list goes on. So how would all this work? Currently, we ask our member congregations to phone home to the UUA mothership from their isolated satellites in the desert at least once a year to tell us the number of members that they claim and to promise that they've met the minimum number of times a year. That's all a little lonely and a little uninspiring. What if instead we ask congregations and other communities to share with us how it is that they've lived out their UU purpose, what help they need from the rest of us to realize that high purpose, and how it is that they've engaged with other communities, either to ask assistance or to offer guidance? And what if our associational glue were purpose and covenant and relationship, not just something we phone in? So the specifics are yet to come. But you might wonder, how will we know if we've succeeded? Well, here are some members of our task force speaking to that question.
Imagine a covenant that includes gratitude for those who have gone before and a desire to make them proud.
We'll share more information, we'll share more resources, we'll share more ideas, we'll work together on more things, we'll cross boundaries and coordinate on social justice efforts. Instead of there being 50 people at a rally standing outside of love shirts, there'll be 1,000 people coordinated and figuring out how to do things in a different way. But that starts with this process that we're talking about, with this process to covenant together, not to just be members of an organization. What does it mean to be in sacred agreement with each other versus being members of an organization? Because what that has often meant is that we have a vote and we can tell people what we want, which is right or which is wrong, versus the covenant of working together in difficult times and challenging times, staying together in relationship and love, which is what I'm hoping will happen. It's a change of framework.
Imagine a covenant that includes gratitude for those who have gone before and a desire to make them proud.
I think the coolest gift that this transition from membership to covenant may give us is we'll realize together in practice that our means, our way of being bound together, is also our end. It's what we're about. Relationship grounded in love that goes beyond belief. And we're just a fraction away from setting up our structures to support that core of our faith. And to me, that's exciting.
So friends, we were to have seen this video yesterday, and then we were going to have an hour in which we were going to break out into small groups and, with the assistance of specially trained facilitators, have this kind of deep deliberative discussion about our purpose and our mission that we long for. We ran over yesterday. All is not lost. We will be in contact you with email, and we're going to set up a website for conversations, and we'll share with you the kinds of questions that we hoped would prompt this conversation. And actually, in terms of our purposes as a task force, this works fine. We were going to take this next year to bring this conversation more local to you anyway. But I do want to just note here a very heavy irony. We ran out of time for this conversation because once again, we got bogged down into the kind of procedural morass that is structurally incapable of enhancing relationships or addressing our highest purposes. And friends, it's Groundhog Day. We have done this over and over again. Last year, we did this when we were trying to address Black Lives Matter, and instead we broke covenants because of our addiction to a dysfunctional procedure. I hesitate to use that metaphor of addiction, but I don't know what else to call it when we return over and over again to the very thing that is killing us. Business as usual is indefinitely postponing our desire and ability to live into a better future. Did you know that the American Unitarian Association was formed in 1825 by a small group of privileged white men who had previously been known only as the Anonymous Club? Did you know that their point in coming together in association was just that they thought it would be kind of good to have an organization? When we did that, we established a much weaker association than our fellow denominations that use congregational polity. Many of them came together not because they wanted to be organizationally related, but because they already had purpose, and they wanted that purpose amplified in that coming together. They already had missions like the abolition of slavery. Our history is not distinguished in this way, but you know what? We can do better. We can put purpose and mission back in the heart of the conversations that we have one to another. Yesterday, we heard about the mission and vision of our presidential candidates. Friends, finally, the mission and vision of this association belong only to you as members of its covenanted communities. I'm eager to have that conversation together. We'll be in touch.